Yo, what's good? It's your boy Danny. Grab a snack, kick back. We got some stuff to talk about. Not everything needs or deserves a response. This is a lesson I'm really still trying to learn. This is a lesson I'm really still trying to get together. I'm trying to be patient with myself and grant myself grace, because there are times where I do feel the need to respond when the response isn't necessary. And when I say this, it's not to enable some type of weird narcissistic tendencies within you where you don't give people explanations when they deserve them. But there's a difference between explaining things to people because they deserve an explanation or because an explanation is required, and then just explaining yourself excessively for absolutely no reason other than perhaps drama. There's no other way to really slice it. Most of the time it does come from a place of trauma. It comes from a traumatized place. For whatever reason, I'm still studying psychology. I'm still trying to learn all these things, so I'm not an expert. I'm not going to pretend to be. But from my astute observation, it comes from some form of trauma. Now, that trauma might be different for you. The reasons why you might do it might be different than the reasons I might do it. The reasons I might do it might be different than the reasons that Bill down the block does it. Whatever. Point being, not everything requires such a deep and adequate explanation, especially when the people or the parties involved clearly don't desire to truly understand you or are incapable of actually understanding you. And this takes a certain amount of not only emotional maturity, but also just a certain amount of awareness to really develop. Because once you kind of develop that self-awareness first and foremost, which I feel like only truly comes through introspection, which you can do through journaling, you can do it through meditation, therapy. There's a multitude of ways to figure out how to be more self-aware, aware of how you're feeling in the moment, aware of how you're reacting in the moment. Because what you want to do is kind of build that muscle that is that quiet voice in your head. And you also want to build the listener, because the reality is you're a listener, you're an observer, you're not your anger, you're not your frustration, you're the person perceiving the fact that that is happening to you, and you are choosing to act upon it. And that's not necessarily to say that like things are out of there's nothing out of your control. Sometimes you're gonna react in a way that is just a reaction. If somebody's trying to touch you in a way that you don't want to be touched and you've never even seen this person before, you're probably gonna have a knee-jerk reaction. That is for survival. But there's a difference between surviving and then just living in the world. And not everything is a survival situation. But when you go through these traumatic events, when you go through things of that nature, you become very hard rooted in this kind of survival, kind of almost corner dog mentality. And that creates either defensiveness or like some form of over explanation. It manifests differently in everybody. But when you catch yourself in these situations that remind yourself of these past experiences, even if it's subconscious, what you're going to end up doing is reliving those situations in the present moment using the tools you have available to you. So if you had a problem being listened to as a kid, and now you feel like as an adult, your partner is not listening to what you're saying, you're probably going to treat your partner exactly like how you treated the people that didn't listen to you when you were a kid. You're probably going to do something to try to get their attention. You're probably going to incessantly badger a point over their head or yell or scream or do something that you saw was effective in the past when you were just trying to survive. Now, the reason why I say that not everything deserves a response is because if you're in a situation like that, where as an adult now, like that could protect themselves, that can take care of themselves, that can think through things rationally, that understands and comprehends that there are literally responses to your present choices, right? Reactions and things that happen based off of your present choices. Like as an adult, everybody has a full comprehension of that, whether they want to admit it or not. As an adult in that stage of your life, it is now on you how you respond to these things. So if you continuously respond in a very reactive way, or if you continuously go out of your way to kind of over-explain yourself and kind of dig your heels in these pockets that you don't need to, you end up doing yourself a disservice, because now you're suffering way more than you have to. So certain arguments don't necessarily need to be had because the argument isn't even the argument. Like you're sitting there arguing with your wife about fucking peanut butter in the fridge, but realistically the argument isn't about peanut butter in the fridge. And that can only really be observed if you take yourself out of it for a second. If you stop trying to just respond, stop trying to react to everything, stop trying to just give everything a response right away, just stop talking. And it's not to say that you withdraw, but simply stop trying to just speak so fast. Stop trying to be so defensive. And it's easier said than done, but the more that you learn to diffuse yourself, the easier it is to diffuse others. The easier it is to navigate around others. Certain things, certain topics, they need more knowledge before you can tackle them. If I put an advanced calculus problem in front of you and you've never even done basic algebra, you're gonna struggle with the problem. But if I walk you through the basic algebra and then I walk you through the geometry and then I walk you through some pre-calc and then I put you in the calculus class, you'll probably have a way better chance of doing well. But the problem is we're almost conditioned to believe that we, especially in this day and age with social media and everything else, I empathize with everybody that has to kind of almost feel this insurmountable pressure that they need to have the answers to everything or they need to have everything figured out. You don't. Like, it's literally not even possible. It's really not. And anybody that's posturing themselves as the authority that knows everything probably doesn't know shit other than how to convince you that they are the authority. Most of us don't know what we're doing. Most of us don't have all the answers. Most of us don't even have ourselves figured out entirely, if not all of us. And we're all still trying to learn on the way, and that's cool. But the only way that you kind of really get to that frame of mind is if you allow yourself to slow down. And I've experienced this firsthand on a multitude of occasions. Anytime that I keep putting my foot on the gas and I keep trying to nail in that hammer in that nail, right? Every time I try to keep hammering in that nail, no, I'm right, da, 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 it never goes in my favor, even if I'm right. Even if you're right, nobody wants to be yelled at about it. Even if you're correct, nobody wants to hear it 30,000 times, especially not in some bitchy ass manner. Nobody wants to. Even if you're correct, being right isn't everything. Having the last word isn't everything. Being the person to respond to everything isn't worth it because you don't really win in the end. You're just kind of being insufferable. And it's probably not even your fault. But what is within your control or what can be brought to your awareness, especially after engaging with something like this, is that there is a way to go about interactions with people without always leaving with a migraine because you feel the need to defend every single aspect of your humanity when you really don't have to. But the only way that can really work is if you also let other people be, which seems passive and it seems like they wouldn't bring about any actual change. But when you let people be, you also leave room for them to teach you something. When you just keep trying to push somebody else to be a certain kind of way, you actually don't get to learn anything yourself, which is actually almost in a way positioning yourself as if you're perfect when you're not. It's positioning yourself as if your ideology is perfect, which it's not. Because if it was, then the antithesis wouldn't exist. We can learn something from each other no matter what. And the only way that you can really get to that point is if you kind of strip it back and stop responding so much. Stop trying to just be in the conversation so much. Pull yourself back for a second. Allow yourself to be an observer. In order to learn how to observe yourself better, you have to learn how to observe the world better. In order to observe the world better, you have to learn how to observe yourself better. It is only when you kind of couple those two things together that the idea of developing a better perspective to not get into these situations happens. Otherwise, you're always going to find yourself trying to defend every single thing about yourself tooth and nail, because I've done it and I still find myself doing it from time to time, and it doesn't make sense. It's, for lack of a better word, or I guess the best word I can use, exhausting. And with so much going on, with so many things that we already have to juggle within the world, you don't want to be exhausted because you're just trying to be yourself. That's like the worst delegation of energy possible. It shouldn't take any effort at all to be yourself. And it's not because it's easy to be who you are, it's because it's not anybody else's choice who you are. It's nobody else's decision but your own. So it should be the least exhausting part about existing, not the most. So stop giving everything a response. Stop trying to justify everything. Just let it be. If that's who you are, that's who you are. If that's what you do, that's what you do. and eventually find a way to work around to some type of understanding of all aspects. I'm not saying you have to agree. I'm not saying that you have to be buddy-buddy with somebody, but understand. Try to understand. Try to empathize. Try to see the angle, even in the areas that they don't. Sometimes you have to have enough awareness for both people in a situation. And yeah, it's not always fair, but why would you give up what you've learned? Why would you give up the progress you've made for the sake of regression just because you don't think it's fair that somebody else hasn't progressed? It's not always going to be fair. You're not always going to be on the same playing field as somebody mentally. Sometimes you will hold the torch. Sometimes you will be ahead. And sometimes there's going to be people around you that are also ahead. So don't get it twisted. It's still fair. Because is it fair to the person that has to pull you up when you don't understand shit? No. You're not always going to be the smartest guy in the room. You're not always going to be the dumbest guy in the room. It's literally not possible for either or. Eventually, you're going to be in a room where you are the person that has the most money. Eventually, you're going to be in a room where you're the person with the least money. Eventually, you're going to be in a room where you're a person with the most muscle. Eventually, you're going to be in a room with somebody that has the least amount of muscle. You could go on for days, years, eons. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.